How's it going, everyone? I'm Evan.
I'm Boschkeem.
And we're the MTG guys, coming at you with our second episode of Catfish Cards Removal Edition.
In this episode, we're going to talk about removal in Commander. We have 4 key guidelines that we want to follow for all of our removal spells. We want them to be efficient, we want them to be instant speed, we want them to be versatile with multiple targets possibly, and also if there can be a land in an MDFC, that's just gravy.
Let's get started with some popular removal that doesn't fall into these categories, starting with Putrefy. Now, this is black-green 1 to destroy an artifact or creature that can't be regenerated, which, yes, it has a couple targets, but again, it's 3 mana, it is instant speed, but there are way better options in these colors, and that's why this falls on the bad list. Now, I'm not saying that Putrefy is not playable. All removal is pretty playable. However, in black-green, there are several options that cost less mana and hit more targets. Mortify is in the same category as Putrefy. It's 3 mana, and it hits only 2 targets. Now, in black and white, there are enough creature and enough enchantment removal spells that are way more efficient than this that it really isn't worth a slot unless you're on a budget.
Vindicate is a card that hits all the versatility checkpoints. You can target any single permanent with it. The problem comes when it comes to its casting speed. We can't have our removal be at sorcery speed because they do nothing when our opponents go off on their turns. There's also just strict upgrades to this card that are objectively better. I think Bedevil is actually one of the worst removal spells on this list. First of all, Planeswalkers aren't really an important target in EDH. They just die to combat damage most of the time. And you also require to have 3 colored mana, so there's times when you're going to have 3 mana available, but not of the right colors, so you can't even cast this card.
And the last card I want to get into is Crows and Grip. Now, this card is by no means bad, but it's more on the inefficient side. Now, yes, Split Second can save you maybe 1 out of 100 games. However, there are a few other green options that are going to allow us to more efficiently remove artifacts and enchantments like Nature's Claim and Force of Vigor. In most game states, leaving up 3 mana for artifact or enchantment removal is just not very necessary. Yes, the Split Second is helpful, but I would rather just save more mana in most of my games than hold up 3 mana to maybe remove something. So let's get into what kind of removal we want to see. Nature's Claim is an amazing card. It's 1 green. It makes the opponent gain 4 life, which 4 life is not that big of a deal in Commander. It's 1/10 of someone's health pool, and really you're trying to do much more damage on a much bigger scale. So you don't need to worry about that 4 life. And holding up 1 green isn't really that big of a deal, and it's way more efficient than holding up 3. Force of Vigor is in that same category. It's a 2 for 2, it costs no mana, and it blows out really greedy keeps with mana rocks. It's so hard to play around. It really is just a much more efficient spell, and we'll sacrifice that Split Second for a no mana cost.
So the strict upgrade that I was talking about earlier about Vindicate is Anguished Unmaking. It hits all non-land permanents, it's instant speed, it costs the same, and it exiles a target. So they're never going to get it back, and the 4 life it costs you isn't that relevant.
Let's get into some replacements for Putrefy, starting with Assassin's Trophy, which is incredibly efficient. It hits every single permanent, and it only really gets them a basic land, which is not that big of a deal. For a 1 green, 1 black instant speed, this is a powerhouse of a removal spell. Abrupt Decay is another black-green powerhouse removal spell. It hits any non-land permanent CMC 3 or less, and it's uncounterable for just a green and a black and instant speed. So this is going to be very, very good at removing our low-cost permanents that are really tricky and that our opponents want to protect.
Next up is a pair of free black removal spells, Snuff Out and Force of Despair. So Snuff Out is just a free removal spell if you control a swamp, which if you're playing black, odds are you will. It can target any creature that's outside of black, which is kind of a downside, but it's still just a free spell, and the 4 life it costs just doesn't matter. Force of Despair is just a house every single time I've seen this spell cast. Even if you don't have the black card to exile from your hand, 3 mana for the effect is not that bad. It can be a single target removal when you need it to be, and you can also use it as just a one-sided board wipe for the player that has just gone off. It's insane when you cast this card on somebody's end step, and it hits probably like 3 or 4 creatures.
Abrade is a really efficient removal spell. It's 1 in red, it's instant speed, it hits multiple targets, and yes, it only does 3 damage, but 3 damage hits a lot of really important creatures. This is especially important in red decks because you don't have a whole lot of options when it comes to removal, and so this card hits 2 birds with 1 stone. Drown in the Loch is one of those really efficient removal spells. It can counter a spell, it can remove a creature, however, you do need to have cards in your opponent's graveyards, so this doesn't slot in every single deck that plays blue and black, but blue and black is very good at filling up everyone's graveyard, so it slots in several decks.
In Commander, there really isn't that much difference between a vanilla 2/2 and a vanilla 4/4, which means that Resculpt is probably objectively better than Reality Shift. Not only do you get to hit an additional type in artifacts, but also you don't face the downside of Reality Shift of them being able to just cast the manifested card. That being said, I still think Reality Shift is still really playable in low color blue decks because exiling a creature for 2 mana is still a really good rate.
Return to Nature is another one of these 2-mana efficient modal removal spells. This is 1 and a green, can hit an artifact, it can hit an enchantment, and it can hit a card in a graveyard. Especially for mono green, this is really good tech, really efficient removal, and it's budget friendly. Graveyard Hate is so important for stopping out people's combos. This card is just a house, especially if you don't have other options.
The last pair of removal spells today might look a tad different from everything else we've gone over. Hagra Mauling and Shatterskull Smashing are both MDFCs, so despite them being overcosted for their effects, the opportunity cost is playing them in place of a basic land. I think that they should go in most 1 to 2 color red and black decks, and your other lands can't be used as a removal. So even though Hagra Mauling comes in tapped and Shatterskull Smashing, you might have to pay 3 life for it to act as a mountain. The upside is using them as a removal spell when you would have had just a land.
Thank you all for watching. I hope this video helped you choose what kind of removal you want in your deck.
Don't forget to subscribe and like this video, and if you want to check out one of our earlier videos, they should be on your screen right about now.